Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Mint Etc. podcast. This episode is going to be as interesting as the other episodes because we have a lot of news to share. Of course, Shavik, my co host, is back from the India Impact Summit and also the NASSCOM Summit. So, these two summits together tell you the state of the IT sector and, the way AI models have gone down as a battering ram on the IT sector. And of course, I will explain why I'm saying very unfairly, battered the stocks. We will explain that in a bit. But I think much of the market reaction was kind of a little premature. There is clearly a lot of pain that is there for the IT sector, but I'm sure over a period of time they will hopefully be able to adapt. At least that's the hope that we live on. And of course, we're going to talk about Anthropic shares, which again the developments with Claude and the plugins, the Claude code security tool, and of course the entire development of coming up with a tool that can tackle maintenance of mainframes, so the COBOL software as such. Now, these are three interesting developments. All of them are interconnected, as you see. But let's start first with, of course, the India Impact Summit. Now, both Shavik and I wrote reams about it. I think there were the ups and downs. Shavik was on the spot. Shavik, let's start with you. I mean, my first impressions, of course, are those unfortunate reminders of, the I would say the angst on day one, serpentine queues, a lack of cash. I mean, insistence on cash payments. At a time when UPI is around, and of course, yeah.
No, Leslie. In fact, when you started this segment, I thought you were going to say, firstly, I'd start with my sincere condolences for you, because that's what it sounded like, and I'll tell you why. Because on the second day, technically, of the summit, which is after the inauguration on Tuesday in the morning, um, we were all there on the ground by around 10 in the morning, and of course, um, good opportunity to meet a lot of leading voices in AI around the world. No denying that. But at one point, I felt thirsty, and the media facilities which they had made, credit where it's due once again, absolutely fantastic, world class facilities. They set up studios for various publications. The media lounge itself was one full floor, enough space for journalists from around the world, food facilities through the day, all of that. It's a complete given, but it was at the other end of the venue, and I wanted to grab a bottle of water from the food and beverage area. So when I went, I was told that I need to get a pay slip from the counter, and for a festival of this magnitude, at that very day, at the end of the day, Abhishek Singh, additional secretary of the IT ministry, he told us that 1.25 lakh people had come on that one particular day, and there were two payment counters for 1.25 lakh people, and you had to go stand at the counter to get a bottle of water. Even a bottle of water, you couldn't just pay money and just get a bottle, because I think on the first day they tried to show how everything is cashless, how everything is seamless, and it just didn't work, because I remember meeting quite a few people, foreign delegations from Kenya, foreign delegations from the US, who were absolutely flustered that water should be free. I mean, why is
That's what
why
I
why
thought.
yeah, and A, why is water being sold, and B, just to buy a bottle of water I need to queue up with 400 people? That's just crazy. And I think that sort of went the other way on the next day when they just said, okay, you know what, just give us cash and we'll pay, we'll sort of do it. Um, uh, so teething issues in mismanagement, but and I think a lot of exhibitors also said that, you know, they expected a certain quality of crowd to come to the expo, but for the most part, the bulk of the crowd in the expo area and the exhibits um, were students who came seeking jobs, were students, third year and fourth year engineering students, final year engineering students who came because they thought they're not getting placed this year because IT services companies are not hiring this year. So they all came seeking a job, and they submitted their CVs to whoever they could. And that was the bulk of the attendance. And a lot of startups who paid money to be in attendance, for them, it was underwhelming. The prices started, if you were a government exhibitor, it started from 9,000 rupees per square meter. So it, of course, definitely not the least expensive experience. If you, even if you take a 5 square meter tiny cubicle, that's 45,000 rupees per day. And something around 2.5 lakh just for your presence on the show floor, along with that hotels and flights. And the biggest criticism, of course, was that the first day was a washout, the third day was a half day because of the executives dinner in the evening. The fourth day was a complete block out for the expo. And even though the ministry did extend it to Saturday, a lot of exhibitors said that it's now difficult because we've made flight reservations and hotel
Exactly. See,
reservations are gone.
that is exactly the lack of application of mind where I see it. I mean, while
Right.
the gesture in itself was, I would say, okay, fine, a kind
Yeah.
of a sensitive, approach to the subject, and kind of laudable in that sense that okay, they wanted to give them an extra day, but
Right.
nobody works that way. You have already planned your schedules, your flight schedules are there. I remember one of my friends who had sort of booked a stall and he had to come back. He was saying, when I went to cancel my flights, they were charging me $200 to cancel the flight. He's saying, I just gave it up. So these kind of
Yeah.
it's pretty irritating. It upsets your entire schedule. It doesn't work out this way. And if you're a foreign delegate, you would have anyway planned this much in advance, months in advance, in
Absolutely.
fact. So,
Absolutely.
and I think alongside also what happened, there were a lot of positives which we will come to in a bit. But
Absolutely.
the I think the Galgotia University episode, that was another incident that sort of put a blot on the stuff. I mean, yes, you can call it an isolated incident, but the problem is that much of this AI washing that is done, this gives you
Right.
a sense of the magnitude of the issue. That you know. In Hindi, there's a lovely saying, "Behti Ganga mein haar dubo lo." So,
Right.
so it's like this AI washing that happens over a period of time. Everybody wants to be an AI company without understanding what problems they are going to solve, what is the kind of product that they want to show, and also if I think the experience. This is the first time that we're working on a scale at this scale, so it will take some time for these things to mature. There are learnings from these experiences, and we'll work on that.
Absolutely.
But let's talk a little about
Absolutely.
the positive showing. I mean, what are
I
the
would
kind of
say so. In
things?
fact,
So because
right.
just give me a
Absolutely.
second. I mean, because we are just talking about the investments. I think some numbers have been put out by Mr. Ashwini Vaishnav. I think something like 200 dollars, 200 million or something in investments, and some 20 million or something, or 20 billion. Now I forget the number, so you can correct me on that.
Right. So, yeah, of course, $250 billion he claimed in AI infrastructure investments. Of course, bulk of it coming from Reliance with 110 billion and Adani with 100 billion. Um, but investments coming in AI infrastructure, we don't have clarity on where the rest of the 40 billion came in. There was no statement or any announcement to that end. um, but apart from that, $20 billion is what the IT minister claimed. has been committed to be invested in the Indian deep tech sector over the next 2 to 3 years. Um, it's important to keep in mind that these are commitments and not
Yeah.
investments that have been deployed on ground at spot. But these are investments that came in. The Indian India Deep Tech Alliance, it's a group of venture capital funds and top tech companies, which includes the likes of Nvidia and Applied Materials. They announced that over the next 3 years, they will deploy $1 billion collectively to solely fund AI startups in India, which I think is a really positive move. Um, Qualcomm Ventures, the venture capital arm of the chip maker, they announced a 150 million dedicated fund for AI startups in India. But even beyond these fundraising announcements, Leslie, I would like to um, draw attention to one particular fact, which is really really good, is the fact that a lot of early stage startups, very early stage executives, who were still building in stealth, who were building quietly, who were trying to get appointments with various companies. This was the first opportunity for them to be able to walk up to an IBM stall, um, stand in the queue and get 15 minutes of appointment with the chairperson for Asia Pacific of IBM, and showcase their product and actually be able to sort of submit their potential push for becoming a vendor partner of a large company. All the large companies were there, a lot of key executives from L&T, Reliance, all the Indian large companies, the global large companies, Google, ServiceNow, you name it. And this gave a lot of early stage Indian startup founders the ability to meet them and to showcase their product and to potentially maybe raise funding or get business. And I think that networking opportunity at this scale for the AI ecosystem in India was never seen before. And that was fantastic. And these are also a part of these investment figures that the IT minister also spoke about. And the best part about the summit, which is what everybody said, keeping all the Galgotias incident aside and keeping all the chaos aside, is the fact that there was so many people who could meet each other and exchange cards and say that, okay, I'm working on this, let me get in touch with you. I spoke with 2 3 startups who actually got business deals from the summit, and I think that's fantastic. um, a lot of them did mention that, as long as you were not exhibiting, you didn't feel the pinch of the financial burden. If you were here to network and meet people, you had an attendee pass, you could attend the expo, and I think that was the biggest takeaway. There were tables where you could sit and meet various key executives of companies. um, and I think it was a great experience for people who are either they've just started building or trying to understand what to build even for them. I think that's a great
Well, I think
opportunity,
that's
this
extremely
summit.
important, Shavik. I mean, from a networking perspective, startups rarely get the chance of, I mean, we have heard of the famous elevator pitches that happen with VCs.
Right,
Now, those are like kind of, okay, please tell me, in just 2 minutes or so. I mean, I've sensed that arrogance that happens. Now, when you start
right,
democratizing that entire process, you also realize that yes, at the end of the day, startups also have access to funds from other sources, and that's extremely important because there are angel investors, there are the VC funds, and of course the limited partners, etc. But at the same time, if you have access to at least you get a hearing, that gives you enough confidence to get into the
right.
and understand that you're part of a larger AI ecosystem. And I think in that respect, I must say that the India Impact Summit has had quite an impact. And also, from a geopolitical point of view, if you remember, we have come up with this that declaration, which I think is signed by over 90 countries as we speak. Now, that is also an important step because it gives India that kind of fillip or the kind of strength that India is now, a geopolitical force to reckon with, at least in the AI space. And it's not only AI, because then it is linked to the larger economy, the broader economy. You're standing as a country, and you're seeing it also. You find Prime Minister Narendra Modi moving around in different circles, and it gives you a lot more leverage because you're taken very seriously as a person who's there on the cutting edge. So after the US and the whole China plus one strategy that we have, India is a pretty decent option, I would say, at this point in time. A long way to go. That said, there's a long way to go, and we have to realize, because there are critics who have time and again raised this point: where are you actually going to get the money from? That transparency over a period of time has to be brought in. I think that's extremely important, because here we are talking about commitment figures. We are talking about billions of dollars being pumped in, but where the money is going to come from, and over what period of time. And we need to keep track of these things. I think that's
Right.
part of the media journey, where you need to keep like, okay, this person has committed so much, what exactly happened? Because, like, say, if it's semiconductors, it used to happen. I had covered it for almost 3 decades. I realized that over a period of time,
Right.
most of those plans had fizzled out. Then it was kind of reinventing the wheel over a period of time, and it gets extremely exasperating, frustrating, uh, and it gives you a sense of skepticism over a period of time, and that should not be
And
happening out here. So, to continue with this momentum, I was sort of partly glad that the NASSCOM summit also was happening in close proximity, because many of the speakers would have shifted, instead of going.
from one venue to the other.
Yeah, so
Absolutely.
that was in a way good, also in a way probably for NASSCOM. They would have missed out the big names, because
Oh, I think it made their life quite difficult.
yeah,
Actually,
obviously,
I think
because you can't expect people like Sam Altman and Dario Amodi and etc. Spending so much time in India. That's not their focus really. So you
absolutely
can't have them here for an India AI summit, then again kind of NASCOM summit, and then again for something. No, that's not
right.
going to happen. So that perhaps,
But before we go
yeah.
to NASSCOM, Leslie, I'd just like to chip in on this particular point that you mentioned about keeping accountability and track of the fundings and these large billion-dollar commitments. Um, I think it's very important for our listeners to know that, for instance, the $110 billion that Reliance Industries committed over 7 years. Um, it's important to know that this isn't necessarily money that's going to be on the ground and is a new fresh investment into something completely greenfield. um, there are investments which Reliance Industries has already made. This commitment includes those figures as well. This commitment includes their partnership with Brookfield for the 1 gigawatt data center as well. um, Same for the Adani Group. Their commitment includes their green energy pitches, even for data centers, their partnership with Google for Google's Vizag data center. So, a lot of these investment figures aren't necessarily um, core money that's just going to be put into the industry. So I think it's a little ambiguous in that sense. And like what we were just discussing, that even when the minister spoke about $250 billion in AI infrastructure investment, and we heard Reliance and Adani speak about 210, even if we take the conglomerates on face value, there is still a gap of $40 billion, which is
Yeah,
a lot of money, I think.
if I were to draw a kind of a far-fetched analogy, it's like the salary of an employee, the cost to company and what you get in hand. So there are
Yeah,
a
of
lot of
course.
deductions
And
that,
that
uh,
difference is
yeah.
very important to keep in mind.
I think our viewers and listeners are smart enough to understand those things. But yes, I think what Shavik was insisting on was to not to get caught too much with the numbers, and understand the kind of commitment. More important, the commitment towards building India's AI ecosystem, the way Stargate is doing now. Now, when Stargate also promised that, what was it, 500 or $600 billion, it doesn't pan out the way. Already many of the investors are backed out, you know so we have had these kind of parallels that are already there. So similar things will happen here, but more important is that, yes, the semiconductor story is in place. We have the LLM stories that is in place. We have the GPUs coming. I think some additional 20,000 GPUs have been added. That's a good story. All the conglomerates are now committing money towards the AI ecosystem. We are talking about solar powered data centers and some data centers in space also. So this is a very good, it's a
Right.
good story. Now let's come to a slightly different kind of skeptical part, which is NASSCOM. Now NASSCOM has come up with the figures on a 6.1% growth, a YOY growth for FY 2026. But it has come very interestingly at a time when Anthropic has battered the stock markets. Of course, there were three
Right.
developments for the viewers and listeners who already would be knowing it. Anthropic's first blow cost the markets almost $285 billion dollars in valuation, simply because it came up with
Right.
11 plugins that could easily allow anybody, any enterprise to use these plugins, handle legal, sales, analytics tasks for water. Then it came up with a what is known as the Claude Code Security Tool, which identified hundreds of long undetected vulnerabilities, especially in open source. I think because open source technologies are generally not governed by any one team as such. It's a kind of a voluntary approach. And then most recently, it claimed that its models can streamline COBOL code. Now, COBOL code is the one which, primarily it runs on IBM systems, mainframes, and it
Right.
sort of modernizes legacy systems. That's the whole idea because it's deeply embedded in banking and government systems. So, Indian firms, whether it's TCS, Infosys, etc., employ thousands tied to these mainframe and legacy maintenance systems. Now, this is exactly what has happened. Ironically, Shavik, I do not know whether you missed it or you detected it, that Claude itself has been pulled up by one of these security firms, of course, in consultation with Anthropic itself, for having loopholes in the security thing. So that's pretty
Right.
interesting.
So interestingly, in fact, Leslie, Anthropic is probably the only AI company which actually has a dedicated safety and security team whose job is to poke loopholes into Claude and report about it in public domain and disclose it,
So
um,
the point
which
is
is
like, okay, I mean,
really
Claude itself has a lot of security bugs to fix, but
right.
the interesting part was here. This created a scare, and you saw the I mean, the reaction of the markets. I won't call it just an overreaction because there are like Jeffries and all have come up with very detailed reports. So has Citrini research. It has drawn up a scenario which both you and I have covered right up to 2028 as to what will happen, how it is going to pan out. But NASCOM's reaction is the same. Like, okay, in a sense, there will be some pain. I mean, I'm just summarizing it for the viewers and listeners that there will be some definitely pain in the midterm, but in the long term, story is intact because there are no cancellation of contracts, and modernization of legacy systems will happen with AI augmentation. And of course, to be fair, I mean, to some part, you can say that TCS tied up with OpenAI, Infosys tied up Anthropic, right?
With Anthropic.
Yeah, of course, it
Right.
missed the OpenAI boat in 2017 when Vishal Sikka was around. That's a different issue. Everybody has already raised that point time and again. But when we reinvent, I mean, sort of this kind of reinvention that is happening, what is your sense on Indian IT firms? I have my opinions, which I have already stated very categorically. I I will come to it, but let's hear you out.
I think, in fact, we're writing a story right now as we speak on this that the general mood when people were on stage and on screen and on the mic um, was of cautious optimism, is what they've kind of put it as. That it's important for us to wait and watch, but AI is definitely an opportunity. But in closed doors and closed circles, there are uh, tech leaders in India who actually view this as a seminal moment because they don't know what is exactly going to happen. Of course, there is one side of the argument that in the 1990s and early 2000s, when ERP came in for the first time, SAP and Salesforce came in, and everybody thought, okay, enterprise processes are being digitized, IT services will die. Of course, they didn't. Then the 2010s, the 2010s decade, when cloud came in, everybody said, okay, there you go, on-prem IT management is no longer needed, so IT services companies will lose their jobs. Um, but they survived. and they're hoping that AI is going to be the same. But also at the same time, it's interesting because a lot of top CEOs and CXOs really don't know what is going to happen,
Yeah, but
and they are
what I find funny in this entire incident and amusing also is that many of the IT leaders are saying that the media is responsible for the overreaction, which is not the case actually. Honestly speaking, most of the reporters are just reporting what is happening in the field with quotes. So honestly speaking,
right.
there's and it's the analysts actually who are actually battering the companies. And the question that is being asked is a very fundamental question. Now, nobody is denying the fact. See, McKinsey came out with a lovely note, I think it was in March or something, where it said that 70% of software that runs legacy systems, is still 20 years old. Okay, it's about 2 decades old.
Right.
So, modernization of
Absolutely.
legacy systems, everybody knows about it. We have been talking about it, time and again. But whether the modernization of the legacy systems, whether they're COBOL based, whether they're whatever Fortran based, or whatever they are, whether they will happen with the help of Indian IT services firms in that manual with a lot of manual intervention, or whether they will have in an automated fashion with Anthropic kind of agents, whether agentic AI, regardless of whether it's going to be from Anthropic or OpenAI or from Google or from Meta or whichever company it be. Now, that is the fundamental question that everybody is asking, and I do not see Indian IT leaders coming out with any firm answers. See, saying that modernization, that legacy systems have to be modernized, everybody accepts it. But who's going to do it? Now, we all understand that agentic AI systems have to be supervised. They cannot go without guardrails. Then it's also a very
Right.
heavy regulated, the BFSI sector is highly regulated. So obviously, you
Right.
cannot have agents, AI agents, just running, given a free hand running around. No, it's not going to happen. But will enterprises themselves do that with their own in-house IT teams, or will they do that with the help of Indian IT services providers? Will we require the same amount of man hours that was done? Because these are historically been headcount related revenue
Right.
changed over that has been changing over a period of time, but not to very significantly. But now suddenly you realize that no, many of the things routine, which is so ADM or the application development maintenance revenue is still around 35 to 40%. That goes straight down, and that the margins get impacted over there. How much of that margin can be recovered? That is the big fundamental question. And if Indian IT services companies are to pivot, what do they become?
Right. Absolutely. And in fact, I think on that note, two people I've heard give the most human answers, so to speak. Yesterday, I met Babak Hojat, the chief AI officer of Cognizant, who mentioned that there is definitely going to be a disruption, at least in the near future. The idea that the IT sector worked on so far was based on their ability to sign these large deals with companies, which would span a decade, and they would be a deal worth $1 billion, $1.5 billion, $2 billion. Um, those kind of large deals are going out of the window because AI itself is changing every month, and enterprises don't want to make such spending,
Correct.
and that is a key concern. So that was one very human answer from one key industry leader. The second industry leader, in fact, Leslie, was none other than CDK, the CEO of HCL Technologies, who said yesterday very clearly on stage in public that this is undoubtedly going to be a painful transition because it will involve humans. And I don't think there's been any other clear indication of a top IT services CEO admitting that, look, there will be jobs that will be
That
lost.
is exactly my
Um,
point, Shovik. That is exactly my point.
right,
When IT leaders
right,
come, stand up on the podium and say there is going to be pain, and we are working towards it,
right,
that's a very transparent way of going about, and that's what is needed in today's time. You don't require AI denials. Nobody's going to believe your story at this point in time. If you tell me that
right,
this is like what used to happen with us also in the media industry. oh, when AI came, no, no, writers will always be required. You'll always require good writing. Nothing, the story will never be changed. We used to laugh at what AI is going to write an entire book. Oh, there'll be a lot of rubbish out there. But you realize that no, AI can do a pretty good job in many cases.
Right.
And then you learn to
Right.
live with it, you learn to transition with it, you learn to work with it, and you first have to admit that there is a serious issue out there, which I find that not many Indian IT services companies are willing to come on record and say, yeah, maybe it is the fear of shareholders, maybe they do it behind their iron curtains or whatever. But many of my friends who are at very senior positions in the Indian IT service companies say that they're very worried about this development. So really,
Right.
it's a
Absolutely.
long way to go. But having said
I
that,
think we've been also by our producer that our time is up.
yeah, yeah.
Very soon.
But I think it's important to understand that these things, these pain points, whether they are midterm, whether they're long term, and how Indian IT services firms adapt to this entire scenario.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think I mean to that end, the other key point to note here, Leslie, is that increasingly to convince investors that they're not behind the curve, um, TCS and Accenture in particular, they have been putting out revenue solely earned from advanced AI deals, quarter on quarter, and so has Infosys and
No,
HCL. And I think the idea is
when you say advanced AI deals, are they reporting Gen AI and agentic AI revenue as separate from the ADM work? I wonder how that calculation is also made. I
my
I'm
is
pretty skeptical about that.
is the key trick there is that classification, but their efforts are to convince investors that nothing has changed, it's business as usual. The fact of the matter, as we gathered from NASSCOM as well, from the NASSCOM Technology and Leadership Forum, is that there will be changes. There is absolutely no denying that the industry will change, the way it works will change. Probably how it does will change. Whether they are all for the better or for the worse is something that we'll end up discovering over time. I met the ServiceNow president and COO at the India AI Summit, who clearly mentioned that the people who end up working in software will be people who think of products and are able to conceptualize products. We don't need people to do the bulk work anymore. And uh, to that end, we would like and we are hiring freshers, because freshers are coming out of college with inherent AI skills, whereas it's difficult to upskill a mid career or a senior career IT professional, because they have to learn and relearn and unlearn and all of that. So at the end of the day, the tech jobs that will remain are people who will build products, who will file for patents, um, who will take an AI model and take that automation and build a new application that people haven't seen. So we are looking at that
I
kind of a
hope,
value addition.
but I hope we
Really,
don't create another generation of AI coders. So,
right.
yeah, because I
Absolutely.
think we have had enough of that trend, and I think we have to move more, up the value chain, and also, not at the cost of humanities, anthropology, sociology, and all the other kind of arts, which I think after some point in time we'll realize the value of those kind of things, because AI is pretty straight jacketed in that sense. But viewers and listeners, I
Right.
think this has been a very interesting conversation where we have realized that okay, after the India Impact Summit, we come up to the ground realities of where the Indian IT sector is moving, and how AI has been a constant, Damocles. It's like a Damocles sword hanging over the Indian IT sector. Now they are like a sort of incorporating it to an extent, but to what extent can they do it without, harming their basic business, which is application development and maintenance, and how they're going to move up the value chain? These are very fundamental questions. EY came up with a very interesting survey talking about, that saying that at this point in time, people will be paid higher on their skills rather than their titles. And that's kind of where that explains Shauvik's point of, the IT sector handling hiring more freshers. So that's good
Right.
news. But of course, I mean, to be fair, there are mid-career guys like Shavik and I who have picked up AI. So Hello. There are always those and a lot of old fogies, if I were to say, are actually builders of LLMs. So this whole concept that AI tools have actually been built by all the old the boomers and the Gen X audience. So we should remember that. It's important.
Right.
So lovely talking to you as usual, Shavik, and look forward to our next week's episode. For now, viewers and listeners, thank you very much for being a very attentive audience as usual. Thank you.